commissaries a chance also to speak up. Maybe something if you want. We got two public commissaries, one in the beginning and one at the end. Since this special meeting, I asked you if you have a public commentary on the event that we're having tonight, comment on that, or any other comments there later. But you do have a right to speak full time. I'm also going to say, give 5 minutes for everybody who wants to speak. And if you do, you need to fill out a form. This is in the back. And get it to Laura, our secretary. She will call you up to the meeting. Okay, with that, anybody is planning to give a talk? For 5 minutes here. Laura?
Okay, well, I've got others' names.
Oh,
Come up, but that's fine. Robert Vermeer, Brian and Lynn Egger, Susan Studier, and David Taylor. Want to come up right now?
Or call them when they can't do it.
Robert Vermeer.
Robert first.
Unless there's not a microphone, it doesn't matter where I stand.
Here,
No, just speak up.
I'm sorry that's the way it is.
There you are. Good evening. Thank you for your continued attention and consideration of rezoning of our village residential parcel on M88 to village business. My wife Ann and I listened intently at the May 11th meeting with detailed notes on the concerns of the neighbors. Before I address the concerns we heard, I'd like to clarify a few things. First, as we understand it, and as I said last month, when I read from the ordinance, Eastport was purposely zoned to be a mix of residential and business lots. Though there are homes on many of the business lots, Eastport was never intended to be business free, but was to encourage a variety of businesses to help sustain the community. Eastport is much more than a quarter-mile stretch of road that impacts the residents who are outspoken about living services. My service area spans at least 10 townships, and yet nearly half of my customers have properties in Township. That is why I want to be here. That is why I'm local. I serve many residents of the township, and we are glad to have them. When the trees fall down, when the power goes out, when they lock themselves out, if a business is going to go in, as the zoning was set up to be a mix, why not have a business like Lakeland Services that is uniquely positioned to serve the township residents? Second, the Lakeland Services business on M88 would house an office, a bathroom, and garage equipment. In my type of business, customers do not come to my office. I visit them to watch and take care of their homes. In my 6 years operating out of Bel Air, I had 2 occasions where customers have come to my location, and that was to drop something off. You should not be concerned that there will be increased car traffic, foot traffic, or noise on any day. Third, we have no intention to have a parking lot, so certainly not a lit parking lot. At most, we expect to have 2 vehicles outside the building at any given time, which frankly is less than we've seen at many of the residential lots in there. My experience over the past 6 years is that 80 to 90% of the time, no one is at the shop location. I'm out and about most days taking care of the lakefront property owners. When I am in the shop for the remaining 10 to 20%, most of the time I'm catching up on email and paper. We don't even have FedEx or UPS drop off packages at the business location because there's no one there. Instead, my packages are sent from us. Fourth, I've been talking about our property on M88. Community members who have vocalized concerns also have properties on M88. It's M88. It is a state highway. The spring property is on the north side of M88 from our property west, the previously zoned village business. Though some of the business lots have homes, they are zoned business. There is the Torchlight Cafe, an assisted living center, a church. It would not be unusual to have a business located on Michigan Island. Lastly, our initial letter of intent mentioned that if the residential lot were to be switched to business, our intention would be to combine the 2 business lots into 1. We listened to and took the advice of the previous zoning administrator. She recommended that we combine the 2 lots. Knowing what we know today, we will not pursue combining two lots. Combining lots doesn't serve any purpose. Next, I'd like to take the opportunity to address some of the neighbors' concerns we heard, some of which are documented in the minutes from the meeting. One concern raised was by property owners who have an easement running along the length of the property. They made public comment that we did not address the easement in the neighborhood. I had personal conversations with this neighbor about the easement both before and after we made a meeting. Ahead of time, we discussed the fact that the easement is written into our deed, that we are legally obligated to comply with it, as are any future owners. I told them that of course we comply with it. Imagine our surprise when this issue was raised publicly as a concern. We did not believe it was necessary to address the easement in paperwork since first, we had already talked about it with those personally affected. And second, it was not required of us. We will comply with the easement just as the township has to comply with the easement so the land that runs under it. Another neighbor's concern was with combining the two lots. As I mentioned earlier, if this parcel is rezoned, we will not proceed combining the two lots. Keep them separate from these lots. Another neighbor voiced concern that we are a licensed contractor. We fear the type of equipment we might bring in. What you may not know is that in order for me to do handyman type services, maintenance on homes, I am required by the state of Michigan to be a licensed contractor. Plenty of handymen fail to pass the citizens test, but is legally and ethically the right thing to do. Home building, if you take a moment to visit my website or talk to me, is not my core competency, nor my desire to pursue. Other neighbors shared concerns about light pollution impacting their stargazing. We understand that they reside across the street. We are a family-friendly business that shuts down at the end of the business day, typically 5:30. All lights will then be off. There will not be a lighted sign. If the house or houses were to be built on the property, residents in need of lighting would surely have interior and exterior lights on well past 10 o'clock, given the honestly, we believe liquid services would contribute less to light pollution on our residents. Other written concerns were about increased traffic and people. This I've already addressed. There is no customer foot traffic, no parking lots. If the land were to be used for residential housing, there would be more truck traffic bringing Amazon Prime packages and online orders that liquid services does not receive. And finally, loss of green space is brought up. Our intention is only to refurbish the existing building that has been there for decades, not build an additional structure or take down healthy trees. If we were to build houses on the property, surely we would have to excavate, plant trees, reduce green space. The result would be more traffic, more people, more late nights, and less green space. We understand concerns about property values. We are homeowners too. Lake Living Services will be an outstanding member of the Eastport community. It will not be noisy, and maintain a friendly and peaceful atmosphere, and will not negatively impact your quality of life. Please consider the fact that beautifying a run-down building that has been an eyesore for decades might actually increase in property values. Thank you for your time.
Great. So Brian, Lynn, here.
I'm Brian Agner. We have a home at 5860, and as well as we live in Justice Street. We're glad that they're voicing publicly that they are aware of the easement, because we have talked about it privately. We also remain concerned about the depreciation of the property value that would be next to business parcels. I'm concerned that the rezoning would allow other businesses in the future beyond what it now has. Because if it's changed to village business, it'll be village business for a long, long time. And all of those things could have increased parking and increased road use and increased everything. We're aware that those problems are much more than what Lake Living would have. We have to consider what the effect would be in the future. And that we're glad that they're not pursuing combining properties.
Susan Stermeyer?
Good evening, my name is Susan Scrivener, I live at 5903 North Emily in Eastport, which is right across the street from the parcels that is applying to the zoning change. I am requesting that each of you vote no for this zoning change. The business located at this site is not in keeping with all surrounding properties, which are all residential. If this zoning change is approved, it could result in loss of value of the property and will affect the rural character and the small town appearance of Eastport. The new property owner, Mr. Demir, has stated in writing that this is his first step in growing his business in Eastport. He also states in writing that he will be requesting that the parcel to the west adjoining this parcel be combined, so that he will have a total of 338 feet on NVDA, zone village business. And I know you said now, tonight, that you changed your mind, but originally you did say you would combine it. And if this is approved by the planning commission and the board, he will have the ability to place a much larger business on this combined site, or in the future sell the property, and it would remain business. And think of how a Dollar General would be used for. We cannot let our beautiful area be ruined by this type of change. Please vote no on this zoning request. Thank you. Also, I hate to say that the resale shop has never been an eyesore. It's part of the history of Eastport, and living there, we kind of love it, the way it was. Thank you.
David Taylor?
My name is Dave Taylor, and I live at 5844 North M88, which is 3 doors down from the proposed change. I'm glad to hear that he's not wanting to combine the two lots, because that was a real problem there. My concern is, if you look at the map that you guys have come up with that delineates the village business from village residential, you've already divided it up and said from here west is village business, from here east is village residential. Now he's asking to take one more residential lot away and turn it into business. I don't really see a need for that, and I hope you guys vote no on this proposal.
No, I don't have any more names. Would you like to say anything with Gregor?
Ma'am,
You may,
I didn't fill out the paperwork.
Oh, we don't have to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Deb Graber at 1227 Beach-Mount Lane. I noticed you commented that I suggested that you might want to combine those lots. Now, I was the one that told you you could not combine those two lots because they have different zoning in each one. So that was because you had come to me wanting to do that. I kind of am torn on this issue because of the fact that it is a very much a residential neighborhood, so but I just wanted to speak to the fact that I did recommend that the lots be combined, but one thing I would caution you on is if 5 years from now he decides he wants them combined because you approve this for village business, what's going to keep him from having it be village business and combining the two lots? I don't know what would stop it, certainly, but just something to consider, that if you have two lots side by side in both village business, just because he came to a meeting, I'm sure everyone will know that piece of paper and what that date was, to know that he said verbally he would never do this. Thanks.
Please fill out the point, please. Anybody else? You have a couple of emails for you.
All right, this is from the 23rd, subject rezoning of the property at 5884 North M88 Highway. Attention Jared Holcomb. I find myself unable to be up north at this time. I wanted to drop a note to voice my concerns about possible rezoning of the property at 5884 North M88 Highway. I As I said at the May 11th meeting, several realtors told me that having a business that close to my lakefront property would adversely affect the value of my property. Also, the fact that the property owner has a 5-year plan. What happens after the 5 years? This leaves a lot to the imagination as to what can happen. With this rezoning of this property, he as a contractor could turn it into a full-blown construction company or property with heavy equipment. The unsightliness of a dirty, dusty business, not to mention the level of additional noise from huge trucks, which will affect not only my property, but that of residents living on MAU. With this in mind, I am seeking a no vote from this board. Herbert E. Ruggles, Drag 9. 4931 and 4935 Northeast Torch Lake Drive, Central Lake, Michigan. Next one, also from the 23rd, to Torch Lake Township Planning Commission. Population 245, not a city, not a town, but village of Eastport. Many of us who live on M88 between East Torch Lake Drive and US 31 spent every summer here, fell in love with this little slice of heaven, and made the decision to retire here. Others have maintained a family cottage, hoping to give their children and grandchildren the same lazy day summer memories. I know I'm able to speak for many of our neighbors when I say that we are not speaking out against any changes to this short strip of Northway or waxing nostalgia, but establishing a business in the midst of a long string of residences is not a change we want. As I understand it, the existing building is zoned village residential and the lot to its west is village business. Zoning, I can only assume, established at a time in the past when what is now a residence was Eastport Grocery Store and the residence across the street was Eastport Post Office, both of which have relocated out of the residential area to US 31. Obviously, there have been changes in the use of properties over the years, from business to residential. And the current zoning of the property west resale shop seems to be a throwback to how the M88 strip of Eastport once functioned. My husband and I live 2 houses to the east of the property where the old resale shop is located. It's been described by its current owner at a previous meeting as an eyesore. Granted, it is not a lovely building, but to those of us like myself that have spent the last 60+ years in Eastport, see it not as an eyesore, but as a piece of area history that only adds to the quaint charm of the area. The current owner has also stated that the business plan is for the next 5 years. Beyond those 5 years, if the township vote allows us to make the lot in question business on 2 parcels, it opens up endless possibilities to much larger businesses, such as franchises, chain stores, etc. down the road. Eastport residents have made themselves clear that they don't want it. There's a great number of lakefront property owners along the strip of M88 that pay high taxes for the privilege of living in this beautiful area, and their voices need to count. If anything, the lot now zoned village business being zoned residential would better reflect the makeup of the current community. The commission needs to vote no. Respectfully, Connie Taylor and David Taylor, 9744 North M88. Last one. From the 18th. Dear Mr. Polka and Planning Commission, I am a homeowner of 5917 North M88 and object to any zoning change request for 5884 M88. The zoning change to business would not be in keeping with all the residential properties in the immediate area. Feel free to call this letter at the next hearing or zoning meeting. I will be out of state from June 20th to July 8th. Thank you. Jennifer Herbert. 5917 North M88 5917. 5917 North M88.
Thank you. The purpose of the next agenda item is the rezoning request PCA 121-1 for Lake Living Properties at 5884 North 88 Highway, parcel number 05-14-106-014-20. I want to go over first before we get into more process, make sure that everybody here knows the process we go through PC. What has already been done, the Park Lake Township Planning Commission had a public hearing on the zoning partial request change already. After the public hearing, the discussion decision can begin prior to the regular meeting. Well, unfortunately, the regular meeting, I was ill, and we had chair so set up a special meeting to keep the process going. Why are we here? To discuss and hopefully make a decision tonight on this item, this request. The PC had a brief discussion, need clarification on the zoning map, of that discussed, and hopefully make a decision tonight. The PC can table the issue to the next or additional meetings. So we don't have to make it if something comes up. But I want everybody to know, hopefully we can move in the direction and we can research it tonight. You want to make the decision, the Berkeley Township Planning Committee report, the request of Hampton County PC, it gives a chance to review it, so it's not, tonight, they can review it. Hampton County PC has 30 days to respond to us. If they don't respond within 30 days, we can proceed without their input. The PC can also, when it comes back from Hampton County, we can also, again, look at it, but generally, whatever comes back, we can make a decision. Who gets it next is the board, First Lake Township Board gets it. And either we accept or reject it, the decision goes on to the board. Sure, you have this email. No. Jack, you should have a copy of this over there. The TLT board, I want to say again, does have a final decision made. Again, the planning commission. The second thing I want to do, we're going to have to start the process, we're going to go through the factors. I'm going to have Sarah lead that part of it. We're going to go through one factor at a time. Stop, then whenever we get to the point of fully discuss it, then I will take over, and then we'll ask for a motion from the committee, business practices commissioners, go ahead and make a motion. And then we'll proceed on that. When that motion is done, we'll go to the second factor and so on to get through all the factors. So everybody knows what's going on. Also want to say during this time, because the commissioners' activity going on here, and whichever we're not involved, anybody in the audience that's we're okay, so we'll keep it. It's our chance to discuss what's going on. Sarah, it's yours.
So just because it's been a couple months, I'll just go through the memo that was in your packet really quickly, related to this item, and use that right here. So this property, as mentioned, is zoned village residential, let's go village business. There is one structure on this, the store that's been referenced in the past. The neighboring zoning is to the west village business, and then we have village residential on the north and the east, and then on the south we've got residential R1 along the highway there. And included in your packet, the uses that are allowed in each of the districts, so you kind of compare some of the uses that are in there. The interesting thing about the difference between the village business and the village residential is that in the village business, all of the village residential uses are also included in the village business district. It's just the approval process. So right now in the village residential district, some of the uses are special use permits, so that within the planning commission with the public hearing versus in the village business, they're permitted uses, which does not have that same process. It does also expand and allow some additional special use permits in the village business district. But again, those special use permits would come to the planning commission public hearing, and you get to make a decision, compatible with the neighborhood and all of that, your standards that are required in the ordinance. One of the items that you're going to be asked to look at is the township master plan and the future land use map. What it's going to look like in our future. It lays out the whole township. This area is designated as commercial residential, along with the neighboring properties. It's kind of this big, huge, not huge, big area over East Court Village. Talks about commercial and residential. Something I do mention is that it doesn't really tell us what that's supposed to look like. I mean, you can assume that because it says commercial residential, it's some mixture of commercial and residential, but it doesn't really go into details about density or how much commercial versus how much residential, what that balance looks like. But it does talk a little bit about characteristics for that area, which I've included here, a couple of bullet points in the pages, which your master plans and your zoning ordinance documents, so you can take a look at those more in depth. The zoning ordinance has a brief section related to amendments and what's required to file your application. We went through these at the last meeting, there's just 4 items. I looked through the application and the applicants provided those 4 items to us. So anything additional, his 5-year plan, that's been brought up is, his plan, that's additional information to you, but is not required, no site plan is required. Those items are going to be required when they come in to apply for the specific use of the property. So the parking, the lighting, what the buildings will look like, different items like that, traffic, people, is something that's considered when the specific site plan for that property is developed and is in front of either the planning commission or staff to review and approve, to be able to use permit to move forward with the use. So when you're looking at it, it is more general, it's great to know what he's doing, but he could rezone this property and sell it the next day. And that next person's gonna come through and have all of the benefits that village business has. So I want you to not only consider what he's looking to do, but think about it as a whole. Is that what you want to see in that area? Is it supported by the master plan, whatever type of development it is when you're going through this process? I did put together, I think there's 8 factors here to consider when looking at the rezoning. And those are what Jerry mentioned, kind of going step by step through. Before we do that, though, I do want to touch on, at the beginning of your packet, at the last meeting, there was some question about the zoning map of the East Fork and what that looks like, and maybe some discrepancies. So we went back, looked at the amendments to the ordinance, we found when this section was originally adopted in 2013. The map from that is the same map that exists in your zoning ordinance, although in different colors, a better map to be able to see actually. And there were no additional amendments to this section found. So I don't know if there was some steps through that have made it all the way through. If they weren't documented, but we don't have documentation. There's nothing to show us that this map has ever been amended for where the village business and the village residential district are located. What else I want to say? And then there are, there's lots to talk about single family residents in the area and in the village business that is used as allowed in the district, just like the village residential. So just because there are residential homes there, single family dwellings, doesn't mean that it's not zoned village business. It's still zoned village business to the rest of the property. So, does anybody have any questions about any of that? Getting into the rezoning factors, the first one, and I guess when we're looking at these, some may not apply, you may find, some you may find are met, and some you may find are not met. I would say that if you have any that are not met, then you want to think really hard about recommending approval to it, because you have something that you're saying, this does not meet our ordinance, this does not meet our future land use, our master plan. But you're not required to have all of them one way or another, like you are when you're dealing with a special use permit. These are something to consider, and there may be additional items when you get to the end, kind of anything else that is really making your decision for you or helping you make your decision. So is the rezoning consistent with the master plan that the future land use have? And so this is, I did mention this in my report, how it was future land use for commercial and residential. And I guess at this point, I'll turn it over to the planning commission if you have any comments related to the master plan or future land use map or any questions.
The future use plan, the master plan has, we talked about rural nature, keeping it the way it is. Then talked about expanding any businesses per se, to just say basically what we have in the zoning, go with what we want, rural, community development. The master plan also talked about commercial areas where we have set aside some commercial. So I recognize, that we do have businesses going in the neighborhood, and so it isn't like, excluding things. Even the village residential, this is not in the master plan, but as much as in the development, village residential is almost a misnomer. because we're talking about village residential, but we also talk about business in that area. So you can have village residential and business, but though more of those businesses got to come to the planning commission for review and, the directions and are acceptable. Village business is much more expansion of the options. And does that tie in with our master plan? Yeah, because it's, set up that way, the organization, village businesses, as unique mixed community, mixed function, and not necessarily go to all 100% business or to all 100% residential. We have the residential options. That's my comment. This is a critical part of it.
Could I, one thing that, you said that this was adopted most recently in 2013, did you say?
The village, section of the ordinance was 2015.
That doesn't date back to 83 or whenever it was written in?
I don't believe so, I don't know, it does not appear to amend some village area before. It looks like a new section of the ordinance, new district, but I can't answer that for sure. I can just say that in 13, they adopted the language as it exists today.
Well, I guess the thing that troubles me, I don't know what to think about it, is when somebody set this zoning up, everything to the west of the parcel that we're talking about is village business, right? Why would they have started residential there when that lot only existed historically as a business and had a business structure on it in the first place? And I wish I understood the intent of that.
Yeah, I don't know why they picked that line there, so I'm going just a little bit further east.
One more
to-
line, and, I just, just a comment. I don't think that has any, like they can shut
I
down.
agree, it's troubling that it happened there, especially considering the precedent. I know it was business long before I first came to this area. And, it just, I don't know if it was something that fell through the cracks.
What they do, right? The business that exists at the time, I don't know, I just put a line at you, come up with a good explanation. Yes, I went back to 83, and I guess I was surprised they reduced this in 2013, and still,
So maybe, I don't know, the history of that either, it was around during that time. But, well, I was here, but not after. The issue of the village, the resale shop there, as a village residential, could next still been an acceptable business under the business aspect of it, maybe that's what it is. See, village residential doesn't mean it has to be residential.
right.
And does that resale shop fall within it? And I was reading this through, for example, on the village business BR, it says, point B says to guide future development within the villages consistent with Coach Lake Township land use plan. Maybe that was their decision. I don't know. We're speculating. But the issue is, it's village residential right now. And if we go to village business, we expand it. Are we, is that the way to go within the land use plan? Somebody made a decision at that time to make it be honest.
Well, I understand that, it's just the intent, is all right. So
I wish-
yeah, what was the intent of the
Of that particular lots and but like, this one first time in chapter 10, what they put together on it, they talked about, encouraging between the mixture of residence and business, they figured that was, whether it is continue to enhance the small town feel. So that's one of the first times I've seen it, and it kind of reflects our, master plan, what's going on. As for this particular lot, why they chose VR versus VB, I have no idea, but there. And there was a resale business. Is that acceptable? I mean, accepted at that time?
Yeah, we have retail stores less than 15,000 square feet, and then call out specifically consignment resale and vintage clothing shops. In the village business, they're allowed, as a permitted use, and in the village residential, they get brought over in the special use plan.
Okay. So we are to permit that type of thing as a special use.
You mentioned that this came about originally in 2013. There are some amendments that were in 15 and 2019. And the reason I bring that up is because obviously somebody has looked at this since 2013. They continue to support it, and they've made, a few amendments that are pretty consistent with what it was originally. So I don't know, I hate to have the planning commission go back and revisit everything that's been done before and with the, to change it, because it was probably well thought out by the people who were here at the time. The amendments were made, and if every time somebody wants to do something that actually fits, or, can fit with very little difference, I don't think we should be changing it.
Sarah, go ahead, Sarah. Usually I'm going to stay back as part of the discussion for this part of this, please.
As far as number one, is the rezoning consistent with the master plan and the future land use map? The future land use map is so very vague, and it's just a big blob of a minus ink. And it's a mixture, commercial / residential. And then there's a lot of mentions throughout the master plan of supporting the mix of residential and commercial development in the hamlets of Eastport. Foster the future mixed residential and commercial development of the hamlets of Eastport, Lake and Eastport, as attractive, diverse, and compact communities. Encourage mixed land uses, such as residential and commercial development, that are connected by walkways. There's a lot of talk about mixing it. Review, identify, and eliminate significant regulatory obstacles and ensure your business startups. So they talk about supporting new businesses. And there's also, I kind of took out a portion of the sections on the back. There was some extra comments from people. There were a couple saying more businesses exist, such as retail, professional services, all this is what Torch Lake Township should look like or could look like in 2037. More businesses exist, more mix of small business and housing exists allowed in zoning ordinance to enhance business opportunities and affordable rental housing. It's just a lot of mixing and supporting of businesses is what I saw.
Does anybody else have anything from the master plan, future land use map?
Just go back, Bill. There have been some requests, one I know about 5 years ago, to change one of the lots in the MADA, and it's going further. Drawing from village residential to village business. And if they continue, I know it's maybe 5 years ago, like in the area. So there've been some look at it, but going back to the material that they put together, whoever they were at that point in time, then go back to God's future development within the village is consistent with the Township land use plan. I don't see, I'm looking at VR part of it because they're still allowing business in there. And I keep looking at all the different list of different businesses. Village residential is restricting the amount of it that are opening the door much more to village business. Right? See where village residential can still be used for business. Even the homes that are there can, in another area, who decide to put a home on, if they really wanted a business in it, they can do it. So I don't see any issues with village residential. Again, I think there's no village residential or certain business options. And that's part of the current. Where I'm looking at it. See the problems with it, maybe some of the business can be accommodated under that parameters without opening it up to a wide range. And I still think it's within each plan as stated.
I guess, does anybody have any kind of emotion related to this, factor?
I would make a motion that it satisfies it. Would make a motion that, that this request satisfies the zoning factor number one. You can put that. Second.
Say that again, I didn't hear you.
I make a motion that the request satisfies rezoning factor number one.
Do I hear a second?
I said,
Discussion. Yeah. That part of it. Discussion, anybody has any comments?
It's just on that, one.
No, just number one, we're in the first chapter. That's what we were discussing.
Did anybody find anything additional to what Laura had found in the master plan, or is kind of those, ideas and concepts, those parts that, you mentioned from there to kind of justify your reasoning and your answer to it? Or does anybody have a problem, I guess, with anyone saying, no, I don't agree with that?
Your comments were totally consistent with my thoughts.
Have a difference on that one, so that's fine. Anybody else? I'll make sure everybody together on that. Okay. Call for a vote. All in favor of the motion as read? Which is my reading again, Jackie.
The applicant satisfies the criteria of the first factor number one.
All in favor, please say aye. Nay. Nay.
So that's 5-1.
Yeah.
5-1. Jury voted no. Because we like 6 here.
Yeah. No problem, that's one way.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 2.
Yep.
Is the proposed rezoning reasonable, consistent with surrounding uses? So, I know there's been a little bit of discussion about that. Does anybody have any additional discussion related to the neighboring uses? This is something, kind of looking at what's out there on the site and what we have in our zoning ordinance. If you feel that it's consistent, this rezoning request is consistent with that.
I don't think it's way out there, yes, it's consistent.
What kind of improvements?
Does anybody else have any comments, questions? Okay.
Yeah, consistent in the sense, goodness, consistent, as the village residential option or as the village business option? Talking about.
You're gonna say is the village business consistent with the surrounding uses?
Okay.
And we're specifically talking about the rezoning.
Okay. I want to clarify that. That's good. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call for somebody to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that the proposed rezoning is reasonably consistent with surroundings.
Okay. Second. Okay, discussion, any further discussion? Okay. Jackie, would you read the motion before?
You want me to read it again?
Yes,
The proposed rezoning is reasonably consistent with surroundings.
as a village business.
That's item number 2 on here. I'm just reading from Jackie if you want to. From her, this is from the packet we had on. Sarah put together.
Any There, okay. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
6-0.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item is will be an adverse physical impact on surrounding property. So this is the rezoning, the potential uses that are allowed in the new zoning district. Will there be any adverse physical impacts on the surrounding properties?
I'm sorry.
Will there be any adverse physical impacts? Is that what you're saying? Based on the rezoning, the new zoning district?
I would say that without a crystal ball, I would say definitively that there may not ever be physical impact for this intended use at this time. I do not think that there would be adverse physical impacts from any of this.
The potential here is, unfortunately, we also got to do that crystal ball and say, you look at the potential moving it from VR to residential, where things can go through and things, you know, you can set up parameters where when you move into village business, the ultimate, to hold more range of permitted activities. And we got to look at the possibility of something occurring, not the individual who's doing the function, and not look at the individual at the planning commission. It is not something directed against individual. You might like this, but once you move into village business, you open up a whole range of other things that you might not know. It is something we got to consider as the crystal balling or looking for the
How do
future.
you consider it? We have businesses now up and down M88 and up down US 31 that you can apply that same test to. I don't think it's fair for anyone to try to reach out that far to say yes or no or base this kind of a decision. Were we to continue that kind of a mindset, we should just get rid of every business, commercial lot and encourage no development. Because we have that same risk with every single business.
Any time you tell you, really, you got to look at potential. I'm not saying that it will occur wrong, but when you expand it to another option, it's something we should look at and talk about it, and not look at as individual liking or not.
Okay.
Like this here, that's one of the key things. Zoning is like a basis you got to look at. And it might not be, but at least we should address it, just like the question earlier was, hey, why did that one be VR, you know, instead of BD or something?
Yeah.
Like this, we don't know what we got to assume the intent. Okay, I just wanted to tell you.
So can you give me an example, Sarah, please, of an adverse physical impact? In my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know, that it's a business that might spill some oil and leave it around, that's what I'm thinking of. Is that the kind of thing that we're talking about here?
Yes, that, and then if there's something, you know, they could build some huge monstrosity that might interfere or be higher than their neighbor, you know, building wise, or, maybe traffic lights, you know, light trespassing that way from parking or something like that. You know, keeping in mind that the ordinance doesn't have a ton of protections, even when you go through a special use permit, but, you know, that those are all things that could be addressed, because there are still standards in the ordinance for different rules, for site plans, for special use permits, that you're going, is there a negative impact? And then you're going, okay, how can we, lessen that negative impact? How can we make it better? So if it is something that there's concern about, say like some cars in a parking lot, you could say, okay, you need to put some plantings from it, but, you know, those kinds of, I guess, things that I wish that were maybe stormwater or something like that, which is kind of hard to deal with in this broad rezoning concept, because it's a little bit more relevant to a site plan that you're looking at.
Thank you. So we might look at, you know, what moves from a special use permit to a permitted, that would be the type of business that would essentially cause us physical adverse effect.
When we move, my correcting this, Sarah, when we move from village residential which has business options that we review. A lot more, once we use the village business, they're permitted. We remove a lot of the oversight, reducing the potential negative impact.
Yeah, I mean, it goes from, if you go from the planning commission to just in the office, or, and there are different standards for special use permit than just for a regular site plan.
So the potential there, we're opening this up to the more factors. You can compare the business, the village residential has business interest, village business opens up a lot more options. And now, what the come here, but also for in the future, it opens it up.
I think that if whoever drafted this village residential village business ordinance section, put a lot of work into coming up with ways to keep it narrow. It didn't just say, this is going to be zone village business and you do whatever you want to here. They have a lot of criteria for what can even go in there. They got a whole list of the kinds of business you can put in there. So they really put a lot of thought into that. And I think that a lot of the things you're talking about that might happen in the future are also things that might require additional site plans or permissions or whatever that would eliminate the uncertainty about that happening. In other words, you could, if somebody came in and said, okay, I want to put a Dollar General in here, or I want to put a McDonald's on that site, it's not going to happen because they've restricted it with what the uses are and what sorts of uses you can have. You can't have a drive-through. You can't have fast food. You can't have, I don't know, I just think they put a lot of thought into that. And I don't think that this, yes, there's a possibility down the road that somebody could do something on his property that one wants to like. But right now, sitting here, thinking about it, I can't see the reason not to approve it.
Yes, further discussion. And I would agree. I think some of the things I hear, there's a lot of difference between commercial property and village business. Village business is much more limited than a piece of commercial property. Now, yes, you can do things with special use that have village business that you can't do with village residential, but they do require that permit. It's still, a lot of things, the size and the traffic and stuff is, significantly limited in these areas.
Just, if you'd like to discuss items or make comments, you need to go outside. We're trying to have a meeting and it's distracting when there's comments out in the audience.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I did great.
I would say, especially the physical effect, everything that you're saying, I agree with, and especially for number 3, which we're discussing, I would say I wouldn't be concerned about that. Like, there would not be physical impacts for any of the potential businesses.
A question here too, and it's negative impact on this. One thing we talked about is, it was withdrawn, but combining his 2 lots, one with the village business we have, the new one becomes, if it becomes a village business, the potential for having a bigger and more options, different things that it may be, is there, that can be a real possibility of becoming village businesses in both lots, if he can combine them, or not, if he doesn't want them now, but something in the future, maybe with a bigger village business.
Right, to make it a bigger lot.
Yeah,
That's true. I mean,
and that's pretty well be a given at that point in time if it's done.
but there'd be nothing stopping somebody from buying 2 or 3 houses on that street and combining all of those properties and building one thing on there either.
But, yeah, they can just, other results for it.
Right. Or if they're already building business, they could combine properties, remove the houses and combine properties.
And I would say,
too, I think it's important to keep in mind, even though he has changed his mind, he could change his mind then tomorrow, and I don't think suggest
So
you're doing anything shifty here, but the decision we make today does not bind you to stick with your decision tonight.
Right.
I mean, you can always, 2 years from now, or tomorrow, ask him his own. Yeah, so that's it, you know, so, I'm not sure how.
Anything else on adverse physical effects?
Yeah, call for a motion. I'll make the motion. You're fine with the.
Number 31.
We're on number 3, right? Make a motion that, the rezoning will not cause any adverse physical impact on surrounding properties.
No second.
Any discussion, any more discussion on the motion? Okay. So any adverse effect, and just thinking of things, we don't know the future. Do we say any adverse effect right now on your surrounding property? There's a lot of things behind it, if we're going to build a business. Do we know, I'm talking about devil's advocate here, that do we say there won't be any adverse effect? Do we really know that in this one? If we look right now, would there be any adverse effect compared to this?
I'm not concerned about it. The things that I'm reading, that our village business permitted, the small retail, professional services, offices, indoor restaurants, without bathroom, all these things that are listed, I don't see any physical adverse effects.
I want to make sure we, about this. Could we start off the vote? Read it again, please.
I will. There will be no adverse physical impacts on the surrounding property.
And then call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Okay, number 4, will there be an adverse effect on property values in the adjacent area? I know this is a hard one, it's very speculative, and depends on who you ask, what your real estate application you ask, and what your appraiser you ask, and, it depends on your position.
And it depends on what happens in the future.
Right.
So you have no
I
way.
mean, or the real estate market of the day, just.
Sir, I can only say that in the past, I've sold many homes, and the property value or the sale price has more or less been, paid by using comps. And the small business would not even qualify as a comp, be it the houses up and down the lake, and the other houses on the other side of the street, the surrounding homes would be very much more likely to affect the property value rather than the standard discount.
Anybody else? Jason,
Yeah,
I thought you were one to, go ahead.
I am a realtor, and there's only one Torch Lake, and everybody wants to be on it. I don't think that this would affect any of the values. I mean, if you go on the east side of Torch Lake, you got Poseidon Docks, you got Mammoth Distillery. That's not affecting those properties over there. I did a little bit of research. The houses that sold, their prices were way above. Everybody's being above asking price right now. If this market was to crash, doesn't matter. Everybody still wants to be on Torch Lake. So that's my experience. I've been a realtor for 5 years now. I got several buyers that want to be on Torch and they can't find it because as soon as the house comes on the market, it's gone in a day.
Anybody else comment?
So Jason, just kind of to summarize what you're saying, there's more intense business uses that exist that have not negatively impacted.
In my research, yes.
Jackie, we next read it and call for vote, would you?
I don't believe we have a motion.
No,
Oh, I thought there was a motion. I'll move that, factor number 4,
that has been satisfied, in that there will be no adverse effect on the property.
discussion. I need a second.
Okay.
Need a second. Okay, we got a first motion and a second discussion at this point. The research you did, you said it was surrounding, some business.
Some of the sales, yeah, some of the houses that are currently listed right now.
So they never say that business nearby or anything like this.
No,
Factored in.
no, but I go and I look on the sale price and 99% of them sell for what we're asking.
Anybody, the impact that, because we're not gonna get like that business maybe in the future to go up, right? So you have that, think in terms of that, not just what's happening with the current proposal. So you don't see some of the other permitted businesses or no business do this impact. Okay. I want to ask you, because I want to be sure we're looking at it objectively. Any more? Okay, now Jackie, I'm going to have to read that again before I call for the vote.
Criteria for number 4 that we met, there will be no adverse effects on property values in the adjacent area.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 So that's 6-0. Number 5, will the rezoning create a deterrent to the improvement or development of adjacent properties in accordance with existing regulations? So this is something to think about, because they are going to, or someone is going to use this potentially for business, would that encourage people not to improve their property, to not stay in the area, those types of items when you're looking at this finding.
I can't think of any reason why it would. I don't know. That's effective, that everybody wants to be here.
If we're looking at, neighbors in that area for setting out, and they're further away, either they're in a village business, they're permitted, any one of them, since we're going from village residential, village business. But if one of those other ones were selected over village residential, would that maybe impact somebody want to be in that? And, that's the question.
No, I don't think so. I think because they got so many built-in, restrictions, I just don't see that as really happening. I think that if there's a business going to go in, and this is right on that line between the village residential and the village business. It's just adding one more lot to the village business. I can't see how it's going to make any difference.
Anybody else comment either way? Since, the expansion, and that's what's really going well, where I'm coming from village residential, there's still a lot of business in there. The planning commission keeping control on, and looking back on the original proposal, nothing against the business that's proposed, but why humans would be village residential, given danger. And, that's, and like, village residential, it's unfortunate, should be more than this. Yes. Any other discussions? So, Jackie,
I don't know.
I don't think we need one. I'd like to make a motion that.
I thought we made one here.
I'd like to make a motion that rezoning will not create a deterrent to the improvement or development of adjacent properties in accordance with existing regulations.
Thank you. We got a motion
Who's
second.
second?
Now discussion. We already discussed on our thing, but
We're doing a little bit better.
Yes. I just want to make sure we we covered. Any other comments at this point before I ask Jackie for a motion that was made reading the beginning for the vote?
The motion was that rezoning will not create a deterrent to the improvement or development of adjacent properties in accordance with the existing regulations.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
5-1.
Yes.
Okay, number 6, will the rezoning grant a special privilege to an individual property owner when conjunct with other property owners in the area or the general public? An example of this is spot zoning, where you have one property in the middle of all the other properties that zone something different. So this is not a spot zoning, it's immediately adjacent to village business. So that would not be a considered, really a concern for you, but the concern would be, is there any special privilege, that they're obtaining with this rezoning that another property owner in a similar position, would not be able to get.
Steve, could you explain how that would work? You say maybe 2 lots over, but say, hey, I want 1, 2, or something like this.
Yeah, if you were 2 lots over and you've got a couple of village residential in the middle, you may be a little bit more concerned with it, or if it were a mile down the road and they're trying to zone it village business, or there's no other village business or even commercial in that area, that's something that you'd be concerned with, either spot zoning or giving them a special privilege for that.
Yeah, I would say there's such a mixture, and you said it, right at the end. Not a concern.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that, the rezoning will not grant a special privilege to an individual property owner when in context with other property owners in the area with general public.
Second,
Okay.
discussion. From the classes and stuff, the spot zoning that you go is a very critical, especially if everything surrounds it. This one is backed up to already a village business area, and then you got the church and so on that way. And on the right side and behind is residential. Beyond is residential. But even criteria, I can't personally see it as don't.
And it's supported by your master, well, according to what the planning commission said earlier, it's supported by your master plan, so that's something else that goes into consideration, spot zoning, when you go against your master plan, and then zone it, and it's the only parcel there, why are you doing it? Where this is, you already said it's supported by the master plan.
Yeah. Okay, in discussion, Jackie, just want to read it back.
Rezoning does not grant special privilege to an individual property owner who is not vested with other property owners in the area or general public.
When you call for voting, all in favor, please say aye.
Okay, 6-0.
Yeah.
Number 7, are there substantial reasons why the property cannot be used in accordance with present zoning classification? So this is something you'll have to go through. The thing that's kind of interesting about these 2 zoning districts, which you discussed a lot tonight, is that they're very similar in a lot of ways. Typically, you don't have these districts that are so similar that you're rezoning between. Like when you're going residential to commercial, can they use this the way that they want to, or that sort of a master plan, where the village, business, village, residential really kind of go hand in hand and have a lot of similar uses, I guess I would say. I mean, they have everything's the same about them except for, when you're looking at regulations, except for the lot size. They have all the same setbacks, all the minimum lot widths. Those items, even when you're looking at the differences between the districts.
I have some questions, or I guess comments. I don't know. When I look at this, they list in here what you can and can't do in village business and village residential. You know, and I was always, have been told that this is very, read this very literally. You say you can, and you assume you can't. So as I look at this, you know, I can see a couple of places where the business, the applicant is proposing might fall, but I'm not sure exactly where. And I guess ultimately, it appears to me, and maybe I'm wrong, and I can go through more detail, that there may be an option to do this through a special use permit without a. Right. For example, the permitted uses in you know, as personal service shops. That's from your, I mean, it seems to me it would fit there. That is already allowed in village residential with a special use.
I kind of thought that there was a big example of like canning groups.
Well, I did read that, but it does say, and I got into this too, it said, what did it call, shops? But I looked up, you know, there is no definition in our thing, so I looked in the Oxford language, and it gave examples like catering and cleaning services, which seem to me are very akin to their business.
And I thought, professional service offices, sorry, I don't know the business, but professional service offices is what I would have grouped it in with.
Well, I looked that one up too, and that was more the accountant, the lawyer, somebody who had some initials at the end of the name. No more. You might have, I don't want to offend anybody, but you know, because I struggle with these things too.
Yeah, that's what I was struggling through. They kept saying, well, why not just create a VR and we can do it there and still have the why change it to a broader classification for leave as VR and still be a business and they can function within the parameters with us instead of opening it up to a wider range. And the village business opens it and that can make the lot even more valuable, but the village residential, which I keep saying this in this number, village residential plus some businesses. And if this qualifies as a shop, I don't see,
Well, that's it too, and if you look at, under 1004 village residential, it says it's allowed business uses described in 1002, which are any of the village businesses that don't require a special use permit. And under that, you've got personal service shops or similar uses. That was the other thing. But they've also got an F, offices, shops, stores, and similar uses with residential uses in the upper floors. And I believe that's what they mentioned in their letter. That's, you know, another thing that kind of confused me. And in your original letter, you mentioned 1002F and also 1003F, and I think you might have a G there. It's not a processing and packaging agricultural project, probably the realm storage buildings, but, you know, the offices, shops, and stores that would fit there, which, you know, I guess it appears to me that the proposed business would fit in the property the way it's currently zoned. Unless Sarah has some comments that I'm missing, something.
No, I mean, just based on the finding, there's substantial reasons why the property cannot be used the way that it's presently done. I mean, it can be used, like you mentioned, there's a lot of uses that are allowed in the special use permit in the residential district. There is an expansion of uses. Thinking that this is a general, kind of rezoning, you're looking specifically at what he's doing.
Right.
The applicant, versus, more broadly, if it were sold to any person in front of you, but I understand what you're saying.
But the way I read the criteria, the reason, or the substantial reason why the property cannot be used in accordance with zoning is, I guess the reason I thought that was a criteria is that you know, rezoning a piece of property is a pretty significant change. And if you can accomplish what you need to do without that, you certainly want to give that consideration.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I go back to, you know, these districts are so similar in a lot of ways that when you're
Right.
looking at, can somebody use their property, you're not looking at, well, it's so small, they can't meet setbacks or things like that, that they might get relief if they went to a different zoning district instead of going through a variance process or something like that. Where these districts, really the difference is in which uses are allowed with special use permit or not.
That's, you know, one of the things that I was trying to do, if you can have it as a village residential dysfunction, would be, okay, Sarah, you know, some consultant, and comment about that, and this particular function, to see why you didn't go this way, or, you know.
Right. That's where I'm leading this.
I would like some more information.
I mean, you can ask, it's really not relevant because you're looking at it more generally, you're not approving his
That's
specific
true.
project,
Thank you, I can do
specific
that.
spots. I mean, it'd be more of just because you want to know, you know, and you could answer
And I
that.
agree, just because you have the option of special use doesn't guarantee you would get it either. So
Right, that's true,
Process it has to go through.
There is a process and there is, it's not a guarantee.
If I'm looking at, we're looking from the zoning administrative standpoint, a request like this come to you, say, I want to use this, I want to have this type of business. I mean, from my viewpoint, this is just my looking at it, it would be a special use option that can be pursued, or would be rejected by the way.
Right, I think it could be a special use permit that, you know, you go through that process, it's kind of the same. Special uses are uses that can be compatible with the area, but, you know, have more discretion to the planning commission than when you're saying they're permitted uses and they are compatible with the area. So is that different than these may be in the right circumstances or the right conditions allowed here versus, no, we feel like all of these uses fit into this district and have no problem, you know, running from it.
Right, and then the zoning administrator does it first, brings it to the planning commission for something to do.
Then I would be inclined to say that it does fit in. That doesn't fit in the area.
That's what I was trying to think of other times. Good, you know, if you're going to some friends, not saying no, saying, we like to keep it. Question, yeah, one more. Very confusing, but I'd rather have motions come from the committee. Somebody, are ready to make a motion on this?
I'd like to make a motion that there are no substantial reasons why the property cannot be used in accordance with the present zoning.
Need a second?
A second.
Motion second. Okay, discussion, further discussion at this point. I was saying, yeah, this is one thing that troubles me in the beginning, looking at this, that why isn't this an option? I don't know why, and it is at this point, that violates everything we are. Anybody else have it?
I don't see where they have a conflict in the rest of the government are. But as we previously discussed, there is some tight control over what could go in there in the future as a business. Is it really less fun to go that way rather than approve anything?
Well, yeah, just open, well, the criteria is, can this request be entered here in the future? So we got to address this subject at this point. It's like in some of the other ones. It's a function that's in the future. You never know if it can even get other things done. But to answer your question right now, this is the subject. Can it maybe be a possibility here? It looks like it probably would be as a function. So that way, Sarah, this is then, if we say it's this way, that should go to VR way versus VB.
Yeah, you're saying that there's no substantial reason to rezone the property.
Right.
At this time. You know, and these are findings, you know, they're helping you come to your decision on it, and, you know, there is a motion on here, but you could say, you know, we just don't feel that this is relevant to this rezoning because the districts are similar, or, you know, at the same time, because they're not criteria, like I mentioned, you don't have to meet all of them to approve the request and make your decision on it. It's kind of helping you formulate your answer. But yeah, you're just saying that, as residential, you know, can it be used? Is there anything that's really, stopping you from being able to use it? You know, that would be something that would come up, I mentioned.
Yeah, can you, I want to read it before I call for it.
I will need clarification from Dave. There are no substantial reasons, or there are substantial reasons?
Well, I was gonna say no, but I think I was looking afterwards.
That's why I'm confused.
Yeah.
Well,
There are substantial, I'd like to make a motion that there are substantial reasons why the property cannot be used for further zoning classification.
Gotcha.
Wait a minute, that's not what we were talking about. Yeah, I thought we were
So I
saying
think
it should be
you
zoned.
withdraw your motion.
I'd like to withdraw
That's what's appropriate, then you can,
And then I'd like to make a new motion that there are substantial reasons why the property cannot be used for further zoning classification.
That's still backwards.
No.
No, it's not. Is it?
No, it's just a matter of you go, which way you're
Right,
going.
which way you're going, just vote the other way.
right, so they're saying that, he's saying that there are reasons to rezone this property.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
If you don't think there are, you say no.
Right, exactly.
All right, if you vote on that.
If you agree with that there are substantial reasons, you say yes. If you don't, you say no.
Did you get a second on that? For the, they are?
I'll second
Yeah, I'll do it.
Here, a discussion. I think it can be done within the village residential. But maybe we don't need to expand it to village business in this particular action. So, in my reading of them, that's what it was, I was trying to address earlier, through the discussion, my mind, clarification. So I don't see any reason to say, yeah, it needs to be done under that rule of time to deal with business. I'm gonna make a motion. No, we got this one.
Have Jackie read the motion.
Yeah, let's talk and then I'll call for the roll.
There are substantial reasons why the property cannot be used in accordance with present zoning classification.
Everybody for that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who are opposed, please say no. No.
So how many did we get?
I didn't vote. I have a question. Can I ask a question first? Okay, so I think it's not really relevant because of the business residential mix that we got going on here. So okay.
Okay, let's vote. I'm sorry, I thought we voted here. All people who said no for that motion, I'm gonna call back here. All in favor of it, say yes.
Yes.
Motion. I got one yes. All those who are not in favor,
I
say
don't
no.
like this question. Number 7, I don't like it. It's not clear here. I mean,
Right, but you can say no, we can make another motion too, we can move on.
Okay.
Move back. So you don't need to, that's not the end of it, we can still cross.
I vote whichever way is throughout the question.
I guess no, but we can start again.
It's a motion, you gotta vote on it.
And I have to ask for voting, it's fair.
I'll abstain.
It's fair
I
if a person
abstain.
had a motion in a second, let's make it. Call on that. All in favor of Jason's motion, please say yes or aye.
Aye.
All those who are not in favor, please say no. No. Okay. And,
Because I abstain.
all right. You can.
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion saying that, and I'm going to make it in Sarah, please, you can clarify. That make a motion that there is, the village residential is the vehicle we don't have to proceed on the request and not expand the village business. Village residential is the category of the zoning process that should be followed. Village residential. Yeah, let me, Sarah, could you clarify that? She's really good at clarifying.
I mean, essentially, you think that village residential is the appropriate
It's the
zoning
vehicle.
and allows for, approval of uses. I mean, specific to different lots, for sure, but.
Yeah, I think that wouldn't that be ultimately what we're voting on? Yeah.
Yeah. We're doing the number 7.
Right.
You just made, but that was
You
a
got
formal
to
motion, or
I'm
that was
making
just
a
discussion?
motion that the vehicle, it should be the village residential.
Without number 7.
It should be not as it's zoned now.
Yeah.
Village residential,
It should not be, yeah.
not rezoned for business.
So you'd be saying, there are no substantial reasons why the property cannot be used in accordance with the present zoning classification?
Yeah.
Didn't we just vote on it?
Yeah.
But,
But that was a negative motion.
it was the opposite.
Yeah.
It was, Jason said that there is substantial reason.
Yeah.
Jerry saying there is not.
There is no substantial reason to move it from village residential to village business. Leave it as village residential.
No, but you said
I didn't hear it the same way.
there are substantial reasons why the property, cannot. See, none of these things get confused. I thought that says can there. I misspoke. Well, I misunderstood.
I heard this can, I did, so can that? Wait a minute. One, village residential, one would just simply say village residential is should be left as village residential. And it can, there is accommodation for it, or there's no reason not, in the active and not to again. Why don't we make it a positive? Could you give us something here, Sarah?
Could we
So you're
maybe
agreeing?
something like, I make a motion that there are rules in the existing ordinance
For village
that would
residential.
provide a pathway for the property to be used as proposed without the zoning change.
Is it, do you like that motion, Jerry?
Yeah, sorry, much better than I said.
Hey,
Hey, hope-
all right, there are rules in the existing ordinance to provide a pathway.
For the property to be used as proposed.
Yeah,
Without rezoned.
without rezoning, without rezoning. Yeah, village
Because that's
residential.
really the issue here.
Yeah, yes, it's a key issue.
Do you think it might be possible in the current zoning to use it as proposed?
So that's Jerry's motion.
Well, it's, okay, I take credit for it. Good. I hate to say it, we did that. Jackie.
We need a second, did somebody second it?
Oh, that's right. Well, I was wanting clarification, second, I need a motion before we second it. I can still ask for clarification.
Yep. There are rules in the existing ordinance to provide a pathway for the property to be used as controlled unit.
Need a second. I'll second you, whoever, I can second my.
Before we get too far ahead, I want to, we've still got the issue with Jason. And, you know, like I said, that's, you know, that
Well,
going back and forth and changing, I don't know if we need to clarify, or if I can get to the notes that I
Well,
did that.
you really, if it was called median, you misunderstood, we withdrew it, you know, we have another one now, so that's the one
We did vote.
yes.
Yeah, you don't have to, you did vote on it, but, you know, you just move on from that
Yeah.
motion. I mean, it'll be in the minutes how the vote was, but it doesn't really change anything.
Yeah, it's still, I think we're the same basis, just two ways of saying it, and I heard it the other way too. Okay. And I think we've been here. Discussion. Well, it's also in the motion, but we can also, once we get a motion, a second, we gotta discuss it. You did get a second. Did you get a second? Did you get a second? Okay, I thought we did. All right. Excuse some of this, it is clarification, but that's the way we're going to figure out every day. Now we got a motion second, now discussion, we're in discussion for it again, you always got to do another discussion. Clarification, so we're on the motion made second, any other discussion? Okay, if not, I'm going to, before I vote, I'd like to have the motion read back each time.
There are rules in the existing ordinance to provide a pathway for the property to be used as proposed without rezoning.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay. Aye.
6-1?
Uh,
Okay. I'm thinking 7.
Okay, the last one is the site adequately served by public facilities? So this is something where, you know, a lot of times the public facilities are thinking water and sewer public systems, you know, which you don't have, but is does the site have adequate size to support, you know, water, your well, private septic systems, electricity, gas, you know, those types of items when you're looking at this. And you don't have those big public systems, but you can use public as available for.
I would comment that this might be not applicable here. As that when anybody develops, they're going to need a building permit. And they're going to look at, on-site sewage, water supply, and all of that would be, you know, they would improve the building that they didn't have adequate water, sewer, and utilities. So that will be looked at during development.
It's not relevant to the zoning.
I don't think it's relevant to this, but
It's just factor for more larger cities and stuff you got to look at. I mean, over here, we use the Kansas County and like you were saying, well, septic system.
I mean, you could look at it and say, well, it is on a state highway, you know, so if you rezone it to village business, is that adequate versus being back on, you know, a private road or something like that. And I'm looking, you know, kind of thinking if you were to put in, say you're gonna rezone something that would allow for a large subdivision, versus something now that's gonna be large lots with less houses. Is there gonna be issues with any public facilities if you were to rezone it to allow some of that intensity on that property? So, you know, you could say it's a non-issue, it should be dealt with during site plan review. Or you could say, yes, it is adequately served, it's on a public road, it's not in a neighborhood, you know, back in a residential development. Type of,
Anybody want to make a motion?
Because it's so irrelevant, I would say it's adequately served.
Give you a second.
I'll second that.
Discussion. There, someone. Jackie, read it back, please.
Sites adequately served by public facilities.
That.
Who seconded
Cool. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right. these are the facts given, however, before we come to the total vote, I want to open it up for any other factors or something else that you need to address. Want to bring up here, any other factors or comments?
Is this the part where we can ask questions?
Audience,
Yeah. The applicant?
usually it's not done at this point. They're in the background, asking the audience.
Yeah, I mean, it would be whatever the planning commission policy is, or if you want to entertain them asking questions.
Yeah, I just don't want, I don't mind opening it up, and I have done it in the past, and sometimes I decide not to do it, so I'm not sure. Let me ask, anybody on the panel have any issues with Jason, or anybody else asking you questions?
I mean, your motion is gonna be based on your findings, on your factors that you have here, so I'm not sure, unless it's to create another additional factor that would help with your determination, I try to limit it to that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, part of it, I wasn't sure, should open it up. You know, I got to limit it to the facts. Yes. Yes, my motion is made for order. Anybody want to bring up any other concern besides the safety? That's part of the opportunity for discussion. All right, we have, the factors here, going, one which is a no factor, and, figure what it is, and the other one is, where the other way. Looking at motion, I'm going to make a motion, we can discuss it, and go on to learn to figure it around. The motion I made is not to approve the zoning change on the basis that we have consideration that the village residential is the vehicle to use and not to expand upon it. Yes, there are other factors, but the key one is village residential. That we should be the vehicle to be used. Okay? That is the motion we make, that we reject the village business request in the fact that village residential is the vehicle to be used.
I'm sorry, the fact that what?
The village, fact that village residential is the method, is the means to reject the village business, village residential is the process to be used. Any questions on that?
Can you repeat it?
Thank you. Rejecting the village business request. And since village residential is the process to be used, or the zoning to be used. Second. You guys, 1 second.
So what you're saying is it's not going to be zoned village business, it's going to stay residential, but they're going to be able to do what they want.
Not what they want, I mean, they still have to go through the process.
Well, people want stuff to use permit.
That's, yes.
Is a special use permit applied for the planning commission, or is that the zoning administrator?
Zoning administrator processes that then comes to the planning commission. So,
That's correct. And with a special use permit, you're required to have the public hearing with the noticing in the paper and the 300-foot family.
all everything except for,
The only comment I have on it's just really a simple question here. We either approve the zoning,
right,
we're either approve, vote to approve the zoning it's best to change it from village residential to village business.
And I'm sorry to reject the village business.
I get it, you're saying based on factor number 7, right?
Yeah, you,
Both exactly.
yeah, that is the process typically. It is a motion, that's all it is.
Are we,
There has no second, if there's no second, then it doesn't proceed any further. But I was trying to do some clarification. If there's a second, then we can discuss it.
So we need a new motion.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the rezoning of this project. I'll second.
I would agree with you
Yeah,
because,
Jason, I would.
I would agree with you because, while I do think they could have done a special use permit or potentially have that approved, they're not asking for that, they're asking for it to be zoned, and because of the village, business residential mix that the, master plan seems to support, that I don't see any reason why we should, support it.
Okay, yeah. Any more discussion? We are on Jason. Anybody else? Yeah, go for it. That's what we're here to try to get to a conclusion tonight.
I agree with everything Laura said.
Fine. But I will call for a vote here. I just want to make sure if you agree, I disagree. I think the village residential is the way to go. And even though the request to go for a village business, I say just keep it as it is and not expand the range of it. How we can accommodate the individual here. So, granted, but, yes, this is in one group. Before we get to a vote, Jackie, please read the motion back.
The motion was to accept and approve the rezone for the parcel number and so it was there.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
5-1.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll send this off to Antrim County then. Their next meeting's not till July, right? They had one.
I believe that
This week.
on the agenda.
Yeah. So we'll send it, I mean, we've got a copy of our minutes due to put with it and send it out. So, we'll send it out so they'll look at it in July. So we'll probably,
We still got 2 more things.
then we get their comments and everything, we come back to the planning commission, I imagine, for your August meeting.
We have to let them do that. 40-some days it should be there. Back or not. Okay. Public commentary. Again, we have the right to the public. We have the form previously filled out. Okay, come on. Everybody have 5 minutes on any subject you want to cover.
Yeah, Dave Taylor again. As far as the, decision made, I think you, to make it easier on yourselves, you disregarded item 7. Can it be used in accordance with the present zoning? Why change it to business if residential fits? I thought that's the whole purpose of special use. I know you don't have to answer. The other things are, when you guys were discussing the, I guess it was how the change from residential to business. One of the businesses allowed under business on item 10.2D is a 15,000 square foot store. You guys all concluded and said these are little cottage industries everybody's asking for and will be allowed there. A 15,000 square foot store is not a little tiny business. And you guys have opened the door for someone now to come in and ask for a 15,000 square foot building. And that's not a residential area. And that's approved for the village business. And then the third item is the remark about the real estate, property values. And you brought the subject up with the side over on there, on the other side. You look at, I'm gonna say 80% of the houses around that area, you turn onto their driveway, you go anywhere from 100 to 300 foot wooded to their properties. You look out the backyard, you see Torch Lake. So no, and they're also working with maybe a $500,000 cushion on their sale price. This township board is for township, the whole township, not just the Lake Living Association. I live across the street from the lake. Property value, my property value will be affected. And when we had this discussion here about, the short-term rentals, we had the same discussion, Philip. Your noses were thumbed at us because you talked about people on the lake. They were given a special disposition that they couldn't have short-term rentals. The people right across the street could have short-term rentals, and I know it's in limbo right now. But the original discussions were all the R1s that live on the lake could not have short-term rentals. But the people right across the street could, or their neighbors could. So that's a double standard there. You're giving special dispensation to the people who live on the lake versus the people who cross the street. And my property value will be affected. If it's affecting $10,000, that's a lot on my property value. People who live on the lake, $10,000 is not even their commissioning they're gonna be paying to a real estate agent. So I don't appreciate the remarks that everybody has, it doesn't affect property values on the lake. We're talking about places across the street from the lake, not on the lake, and my property's on the lake. And I care dearly for that piece of property. It's not a $500,000 mansion, and I don't know where all you guys live, but that's dear to me, and that's worth every penny of it. And that will affect my property values, changing that to a business. And especially if down the road that becomes a 15,000 square foot store, which is allowed. They don't even have to ask for special use. They could have asked for a special use here, and instead you open the door to everybody having the business. It's thoroughly disgusting. Thank you.
Anybody else want?
I'm Brian here, I've spoken before. Thank you for your time. This is, I think, this is the thing. I thank you for your time. I am dismayed that you approved the rezoning when you didn't need to. He could run his business in village residential. And I know him, and he's a pleasant fellow. But again, if he sells in 5 years, it opens up just a whole huge set of things. It's not crystal ball thing, it's major stuff. When he can have his business with the present center.
Anybody else want to speak?
I just really question whether you people did your homework and whether you went and actually looked at the property, where it is. Because I really question that you did. This is a building that has absolutely no facilities, no septic, no well, no electricity. And why you would rezone it village business when that is something that is going to stay with that property forever. And like Brian said, it could be anything. I just think it's very sad that you did that without much consideration.
Anybody else want to speak? And I'll just add, yeah, this comes back, goes to the county, comes back to us. No change at that point, it goes on to the board. The board is the final decision making on this. Okay, adjournment, I can't remember, do we need to make a motion for adjournment versus the chair?
You can just shut down and no further business if you'd like to do that.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Time. Okay.
There's a glare on it. I have 8:53 on my phone.
All right, thank you.
Bill's just going to.